Greetings, everyone. It is Angelo Robles, and welcome to my Family Office TV and, of course, Family Office Masterclass. It is a Saturday. I know I've had a busy week with what I would call my live broadcast and record. Just lots going on, and certainly lots to talk about. Now, we did have scheduled for today, this Saturday, and I kind of like Saturday mornings. They're a little different. And boy, always great to put a suit and tie on, of course, on a Saturday. I think I'm going to have to start doing the Saturdays from now on, heading into, of course, college football, which I'm a big fan of, with a t shirt. But for now, the suit and tie and pocket square. Why not? But I did have scheduled a return of the brilliant Ram Alawalia, and we were going to discuss kind of the US comparative to the BRICS. I wouldn't say versus, but comparative. And it was going to tie in some of the issues around geopolitics and advantages and disadvantages that each have, but definitely how the world is turning. Unfortunately, Ram's schedule wouldn't allow that to occur. Something came up. So I did adapt it online, but some of you may still have figured, well, something's going on at 11 o'clock today. So I figured I have an obligation to my audience to come on and do something that is at least somewhat related. But the good news is Ram will be back Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern, where we'll do a live broadcast. It will be significant. The guy is brilliant. It will be a deep discussion. Um, and look forward to it. So I am going to talk a little bit later about the week ahead, meaning beginning Monday, and how it all ties into the topic of today and how it's going to be a little bit of a theme kind of throughout the week. So we'll get right to it. When I first went live with Family Office TV this summer, so really it hasn't been that long. I think among the first things I did was velocity of destruction. I've been on this really my whole life. Maybe I think of what could go wrong a little bit by nature, but working in the world of incredible wealth and billionaires and family offices, again, they already made it. So you would think the opportunity to hold on to their legacy, to pass down their heritage, their values, and all that to their children, and from a societal perspective, is going to be very important. Yet somehow, at least by those that service the community, including the single family offices, this often gets way overlooked. So let's get to it. Ray Dalio, who has spoken back in my day as I was founder and CEO at Family Office Association, was a great pleasure to have Ray speak. I disagree with him on certain end assumptions and solutions that he has. And who am I to do that? You're talking about Ray Dalio. I agree with a lot of the premise, but I just tend to look at some things a little differently. Why don't we save that for another time? And by the way, speaking of promoting an upcoming program, not this week, but the week after, I have on the former chief investment strategist for Bridgewater, and that's Rebecca Patterson. So I very much look forward to that. That will be an incredible conversation. So I got some great guest stuff coming for you. But staying on today, Ray said, and he does put the complex so simple and straightforward. I'll give him that. He's great at that. We're facing the most threatening geopolitical situation since World War II, while simultaneously being in the weakest fiscal position in decades, meaning the US, broadly the West, I'm going to argue much of the world. And we think it's bad here. There's other parts of the world, from my experiences traveling and knowing people, where it's worse. But nonetheless, we'll stay a little bit on topic. That's a very simple and bold comment that does tie into, obviously, velocity of destruction. So, what really took me down this road early during COVID, I took on a significant consulting assignment for a very prominent family on effectively what could go wrong. And I've spoken about this before. That led me down the path of creating a very deep research project and masterclass. Among my masterclasses, this is absolutely one of them. Sovereign risk and disaster preparedness for the super rich and their family offices. And this family found it out when they engaged with me, and I found this out during the project. And even now, no one, boy, talk about being distinct and maybe as an advisor, making yourself a little different in the community. No one is talking about what I described from the family office perspective of sovereign risk and disaster preparedness on a deep, very deep and immersive level. So that led me down a path that, and now I look at what I created that 3 years ago, and it's like, man, I know so much more now, which is why it evolved into a far more comprehensive. And even then, that was like 150 slides and comprehensive. Now it is a multiple of that. So I'm very proud to have created what I feel is the definitive, bar none, on sovereign risk and disaster preparedness for the super rich and their family offices. And that is one of my masterclass programs. So this was before Russia and the Ukraine. This was obviously before the incidents, horrific, from the prior week here in then early October, now mid-October in the Middle East. And what I deem to be an increase in escalation and political bifurcation here in the US and in many Western countries. So it's only gotten worse and worse. And I know what some of you are going to say. I could look back to practically any decade and maybe pick out the 70s and the 40s and this era. There's always problems. That is true. With the volume of people that we have in the world, to think that we're all going to live in harmony and peace is probably unrealistic. The challenges that make it more complex now, some of it is monetary related. The internet, social media, the velocity of how things are happening, obviously nuclear, although that's been the case for a number of decades, but the threats are more deadly from a global perspective now than ever before. So what I did in that project and consulting assignment, effectively velocity of destruction is amplified. And I gave you some of the reasons why. Some of them just happened relatively recently. We're living in a very, very fragile world. Just imagine the nuclear powers now, the nuclear weapons comparative to when the US dropped the bomb on Hiroshima are far, far more popular, more powerful, I'm sorry. And look at the destruction that caused. Like there, and now one were to go off, do countries have the mandate to, boom, it all just blows up and the world as we know it literally is over. Like that's how much of a fragile situation we have. And no, by the way, there's probably not much you could do, even as a billionaire, in terms of hedging that sort of risk as I described. Or is there? Is the opportunity for your capital through humanitarian, through your foundation, and the impact on society and politics that perhaps, again, could move the needle. Like, don't think that you can never have an impact, then you won't. One person could make a massive difference. I hate to make it more military, but I had someone very connected tell me, listen, there are times on the battlefield, even when it's crowded, lots going on, where you could feel one person is making a grave impact. So I believe if you look broadly in society and in history and are a historian, you will see that one person absolutely can make an impact. So don't listen to my negative comment that even if you're rich and powerful, you have no influence on what happens around the world. Don't take that. People that are great, they don't look at that limiting belief. They move forward. So many family offices are finding that their assumptions and strategies may not hold up in the face of crisis and profound shifts. Understand that. Here's where adaptability and innovation comes into play. Two things, unfortunately, for the vast majority of single family offices are lacking. Family offices must transition from reactive modes to adaptive strategies to negate or navigate, I guess I would say, uncertainty. And again, as I've spoken about, a lot of this comes down to competency. A lot of this comes down to future and forward thinking. It comes down to what I call capacity and capability within the family and the family office. And really, at the end of the day, if family continuity likely is and should be the number one goal, who in the family office or even advising the family is dedicated to the family? And this goes back to what I've said about an over concentration on investments and structures, which are very important. But a lot of the issues that are far deeper, including in sovereign risk and disaster preparedness, go deeper than that. There are areas pertaining to, again, the greatest threat is going to be likely within the family from a variety of different perspectives. So what this is causing me to do, before I get into some key points on velocity of destruction, many of you know, if you go to angelorobles.com, I have a lot of my services and organizations under that umbrella to keep it easy. If you go to my masterclass tab, you will see very easily you could access a near 2-hour video that I did as an overview, maybe for 5 minutes on the masterclass program, and then really almost all the time as a pretty deep overview of creating and adapting into a top 1% family office, which is absolutely possible for practically anyone who has a family office at the moment because it's wickedly inefficient and horrific. So the benchmark of getting better is not that much better. So if you haven't done that, go there and do that. But I'm getting so many inquiries now relative to this sovereign risk and disaster preparedness that I think, out of a courtesy and a giveaway, I am going to probably shoot an hour to an hour and a half video this week that we will put up as well. That will kind of be a little bit of a sneak peek, like that is. And that's almost 2 hours, and I feel like it's nothing. Like, that's not me at my fullest, because that's going to be 24 to 26 hours of instruction, of guest lecturing, of case studies, of interacting, and your questions and customizing a response. Me giving a lecture, that's not really how you learn per se. Do you learn how to play a sport like whatever, baseball, by reading a book? Or you're hands-on, you're immersive in the experience with a proper mentor? And all of that, I could argue the master classes are a stepping stone potentially to engage deeper on a more one-on-one / mentoring basis, because you getting hands-on experience and immersing with me on these topics is really like how you get there. So stay tuned. More is going to be coming on that. And I will kind of have that video sneak peek, I guess, giveaway. Back a little bit more to the velocity of destruction. Yeah, the world is in chaos. And I know you could say it's always like that. But again, I gave the reasons why earlier. It is more deadly and dangerous than ever before. We have war. We have inept governments. Any surprise there? Inflation risk, banking crisis. In the US and the impact on the world of dollar hegemony and the dollar potentially losing status. And that is definitely something that me and Ram, like I mentioned earlier, we'll talk about Thursday at 1 o'clock. I'll probably take a little bit more of a global perspective, and the BRICS are going to be a major threat. And he's probably going to have a little bit more of the perspective of the US. And Rebecca Patterson, again, former chief strategist for Ray Dalio's Bridgewater, probably is going to take a little bit of a similar approach to him on that, but we'll see. Now, again, what I'll talk about, who the hell else is talking about these subjects in the family office world? You have geopolitical strategists, but they don't know the family office world. They're not bringing it in. And often they're too much on one side of the aisle. And I'm not saying I'm perfect or I'm totally impartial, but I try to be. Therefore, I think these are really important subjects. We have a potential derivatives collapse, confiscatory, whatever the word, governments. You could argue that is simply being taxation. That's a part of it, but it gets deeper than that. It could be forfeiture. It could be the government is the ultimate power, depending on certain executive orders and Supreme Court and the U.S. decisions, where in a state of emergency, maybe you can't travel anymore. Your bank accounts are frozen. Things could, I'm not saying they will, they could go wrong. And what's your contingency? What's your plan? Do you really think that most advisors and most family offices are prepared for the worst of the worst? Are these things likely to happen? Perhaps not, but that doesn't matter. They have a small chance, although I'm going to argue a hell of a lot more than under 1%. but a small chance of happening. But the consequences, that's what you got to think of. The consequences would be utterly dire. So, therefore, how do you understand the problems? How do you mitigate and hedge the risk? And how do you come up with solutions? Now, we're not really going to have a lot on the solutions front today. When I talk about what I have upcoming during the week, that will dive a little bit more into that. And I may dive a little bit into that relative to what I mentioned as I'm going to shoot a masterclass preview for, again, sovereign risk and disaster preparedness. And if you don't see it or forget about it, DM or email me. I promise I'll give it to you for free. You're not going to have to do this or do that. I want to disseminate the information as best I could. But the reality is, yeah, like that takes around 24 hours of immersion, whether that's over 3 to 4 days in person, or whether that's spread out in a once a week program online over the course of time. And even then, again, and I've learned some of these things from interviewing Tony Robbins and others, like I could give you the book, but you're still going to need, in my opinion, help in terms of who the great resources, the dream team is, and how to execute. And don't be embarrassed by that. Like that accelerates your knowledge quicker to have a better outcome. And I'm going to give you some examples of that a little bit later. But boy, that's a pretty bad picture, right? World in chaos, and a government's war and all that going on. Your money and your legacy is absolutely not safe generationally, period. The complexities going on from, I could argue, from Bretton Woods, a unipolar world, to now not even just bipolar in terms of the US and China. That's what I mean from that perspective, but multipolar, which now the BRICS being involved. And again, that's going to be more of a discussion a little bit on Monday, but definitely with Ram on Thursday, as I described. Like the world is changing. The BRICS are absolutely, especially as a collective, a threat to US dollar hegemony, let's call it that. And you don't think the US government and three-letter agencies will do whatever they need to do and have done over multiple decades to make sure the dollar retains its status. You could bet you they will. Now, I know what some of you are saying, Angelo, as an American citizen, you and probably whatever, 80% of your audience, like, isn't that good? That's not for me to decide. That's for you. But I'm just talking to you about the reality of how the world works. What have you heard me say before? Imagine the unimaginable and understand that there's more going on that you don't know than you know. And this is coming from someone who's been in this industry a long time, that knows families around the world, that knows royal families that go back hundreds and hundreds of years, and understanding the realities of the powers that be and how the world works. There's probably some things that you don't want to totally know. So I mentioned BRICS and the other challenges to dollar hegemony, however the word's pronounced, dominance, etc. Debt burdens impossible to replay. $33 trillion deficit. How is that going to be addressed? We have declining populations. We have, not explosive growth in GDP. We have all these problems that I'm describing. Is it possible that AI and technology is able to do something amazing coupled with free or near free energy that could be beneficially impactful and address some of those issues? Yes, it is possible. And again, me and Ron are going to talk about some of that on Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern. Rapid expansion of technologies, including AI, but that definitely could be a velocity of destruction, especially depending on your skill set and from a job perspective. Are we heading to an inevitable future of universal base income? Do most younger folk, are they afraid of the future and they're wanting universal base income? It gives them a safety net. They'll never be great, but they'll have whatever, water, food to eat, and a place to live, maybe. That's not the future that I want. But again, we have to be realistic in terms of where things are heading. This could come down to regional and local sourcing of supply chains starting to return. We could get into that subject. I'll probably get more into that with Ian Burlingame, the former Green Beret and investment banker. He's coming on Monday at 4 o'clock. Go to my family office TV, watch my 2-hour first interview with him from the summer. This is kind of a part two, but there's more to talk about now with some of the issues that I described. But we will be coming up with a little bit of some of the solutions as well. And having learned a little bit from military risk and uncertainty. Unknown models must be revisited and adapted with current and emerging realities. So in some military circles too, they call what they call the three rings: within view, just out of view, and beyond horizon. These are important. Now, no one has a crystal ball and could be perfectly clear, but you can extrapolate possible scenarios and outcomes. And I could argue this comes back to critical thinking, open mindedness, identifying blind spots, moving ego aside, things that I pound home to you over and over because we kind of need to keep on hearing this. These are very important things. And some of this will come back to next generation, rising generation education, leadership, direction, and succession. A negative outcome, listen to this, a negative outcome in any one of those is a threat to family, to the SFO. Any one, let alone a collective of them, it could be. So again, in kind of setting the stage a little bit, what's going to be happening this week with me and my programming. On Monday, I mentioned before, Ian Burlingame, former Green Beret, brilliant investment banker, like really hyper-connected guy. I don't agree with everything he says, and some things you might even be a little bit taken back or offended by. But like, who cares? You want to listen and you want to learn. So to me, and you may disagree, that's Monday at 4 o'clock Eastern. We're going to talk about kind of the geopolitical landscape. Again, he has a strong, obviously, former Green Beret military background, and he's wickedly smart. You have nothing to lose. You have information to gain, including some of the things I'm talking about now. He's definitely a part of my dream team, as I call it. And then Thursday, we have Ram Alawulia, where we kind of give the perspective of the U.S. comparative to BRICS and the rest of the world. Especially, that will have more of an investment focus and angle, but it's all going to tie in. And then again, on the following Tuesday, we have Rebecca Patterson, former and pretty recent chief investment strategist at Ray Dalio's Bridgewater. And speaking of Ray Dalio, we're going to get into a couple of other comments and his 5 points, I guess you could say, relative to these issues. So there's accelerated forces that are driving a lot of the things that are happening and causing grave threats and velocity of destruction. He says, number one, very high levels of debt and debt creation in the US and other currencies and around the world. Well, that's obvious. I mentioned that before. $33 trillion deficit. It's getting bigger and bigger. It is definitely not shrinking. We don't have the tax base and probably don't want it, but there may be creative ways around that. And I think, depending on who could become a future president, I could think of someone who goes by 3 acronyms in New York, that maybe one day, her or someone like her, we could have taxation of unrealized capital gains. These things are very possible. So we have massive debt. This could cause wicked problems from inflation, again, market losses. We have, my God, like where do you even start with that? Like, could we grow out of it relative to GDP? Could AI and free energy and what I said earlier? We'll talk a little bit about that with EM, with Ram, with Rebecca, and other great guests and members of what I call the Dream Team upcoming. Ray says, number 2, we have intense levels of conflict within countries. He said within countries. I've been talking about that. I think we're kind of cold civil war. Cold. I did not say hot. Now in the US, there's so much bifurcation. Both sides are kind of idiots. And we're seeing more and more of that around the world, just extreme stances on either side and a lack of character and respect and listening. And sometimes compromise is not applicable, but sometimes it is. You have to put yourself, you have to be empathetic to the other perspective and point of view and try to come up with solutions. And again, sometimes it may not be perfectly down the middle. It may be a little bit more skewed to one or the other. But to think that in this upcoming election year, which is going to give great fodder for people like me and others to do commentaries and do interviews, no matter what side loses, let it just make it really bad, really bad. Like, I'm already saying it's kind of cold civil war. We have lots of problems. And those of you internationally, like I think a lot of your problems are accelerated comparative to ours. So I don't think it's much better. Often it's worse. And kind of that is one of the end conclusions in sovereign risk and disaster preparedness. Of course, you should have passports to multiple countries and varying continents. I could even argue legally change your name legally on various quote unquote driver's license in other countries and all that. But at the end of the day, you're still part of the grid. If you're still tied into the US dollar, if you're still, I mean, I'm not going to talk about some things that I don't want to talk about more openly in a broadcast like I'm doing. This is why my masterclass is something that addresses these issues in obviously far, far, far more greater detail and not just me. But we have lots of problems. Number three, he says, intense levels of conflict between countries. Well, duh, obviously the US and China, but I think it's obviously way more complicated than that. Look at what's going on with the West relative or more NATO and what's going on with Russia. Look at obviously now and what feels like forever the challenges in the Middle East. Like this is becoming more volatile by the day. Now, again, there's certain things I would say in more private or more of an intimacy of a true masterclass or private setting that I need to be a little bit more muted and careful relative in a more public platform. That's just the reality of also how the world works. So those top three that I think Ray said, and I mean, I said, and many of you, it's really no surprise. Yeah, like it all seems to be kind of happening at once. Feels that way, like almost to be quasi orchestrated, may I say. He does say in number four, significant damaging acts of nature. He defines as droughts, floods, and pandemics. I do not want to make this a conversation about climate change. I have very mixed views relative to that. And yeah, there's a certain very young, I think she's still a teenager, somewhere in Europe, one of those countries where, like, I don't know, like, how come never says anything about the massive amounts of climate change or carbon contributions of China, of even India? Seems to be very one sided. And wouldn't nuclear power kind of solve a lot of those problems if they're quote unquote man made or at least partially man made? Now, again, I'm going down roads that are going to bifurcate the audience and make some of you a little sensitive to it. And I go back to the issue that I've said a million times. The family office industry only talks about one side of things, keeps it very safe, very vanilla, doesn't really rock the boat, doesn't look to have varying opinions. My God, it sounds like how politics is run in this country and the world these days. And I don't mind to rock that boat, to challenge assumptions. Am I right all the time? Hell no. Again, what did I say? I think yesterday, great, great legendary trader internally for decades back in the old prop days as well of Goldman Sachs. Angelo, I'm right like 42% of the time and I'm brilliant because sometimes those 42% go up wickedly and that carries the other crap that I did and things where my thesis didn't work out. So that's just, kind of the reality. So yes, of course, we're all wrong a lot. And he goes back again into mankind's learning and deploying of new technologies, AI. I could paint a good picture for AI, which I very well could, and I could paint a very, very ugly one. Go back to my YouTube, my family office channel, meaning at family office back in February, Dr. Craig Kaplan. I think I did 2.5 hours with him. And I have actually one of my master classes is family offices and AI. One from an investing perspective, I think very intriguing. Lots going on there, but more importantly, societal and enhancements in operations and investment operations, and importantly, the family office. And yes, as you can imagine, yes, most single family offices are not exactly on the cutting edge in what they're doing and understanding and being future and forward thinking and having it as it's job security. But again, a lot of them just don't care anyway. So that's just the way it is. By the way, these topics, this velocity of destruction, all these kind of things that I'm talking about, the wealth creators are really interested in it. They kind of love me. They don't care if I meet with them in a t-shirt. They don't care about whatever political party. They're maybe that's why they're so successful. It's just the end result for them. Family members, not bad. Rising generation, all that, all good. It's the kind of the advisors, quasi the gatekeepers. And then you do have to look at conflicts of interest. You have to look at issues pertaining to just not facing up to reality in a lot of the things that I mentioned. Is there, if you're managing money and doing that, the things that I'm talking about, do you really want to bring them up? You don't know what you don't know. There's again known knowns and unknown unknowns, and understanding how to become resilient, how to become anti-fragile, how to be a better leader, how to diversify into other unique assets that you may not profit from. These are all things where again conflicts of interest come into play. This is just a reality again of how the world works. So he states, meaning Dalio, that we're moving another step closer to civil war and a loss of democracy. So what I am going to pull up just so I could see it is actually part of my secret masterclass PowerPoint on sovereign risk and all that. So, and my audience has heard me say this before. There have been other seismic shifts that the world has seen that change everything, even in the last couple of hundred years. I don't know, 1620s, English Reformation, French Revolution, Russian Revolution, Nazi Germany. A common trend, what is that you tend to see in those is the super rich are wiped out, whether it's kind of frozen, taken, or whether they're kind of eliminated. So again, these things happen. They have happened, and they absolutely could happen moving forward. I think a lot of the solutions, strangely enough, come back to family governance. I know you all want to talk about exciting things like AI and investing in biotech, and those are all cool things and all things that are important. But how joint decisions are made within the family, that's what really is going to be impactful to a lot of this. So a significant part of a family's governance is learning and the development, or better, the culture and development of capacity and capability building. And I have a podcast on Friday, I believe it's 1 p.m., with Nick V. Ainern. Brilliant, brilliant man, and helped to change some of my paradigm on governance. And I'm very active in governance and family dynamics and how decisions are made within the family. And these are some of the topics now that really get into the underlying foundation for addressing velocity of destruction. Family governance is all about family members learning to make better joint decisions together, learning to be more effective together as a group, and learning to respect boundaries and building skills together. Christian Stewart, I believe, is the author of that. Why do families need governance? Why does family governance fail? And what can be done differently? These are all very, very important subjects to, again, on one day, a deeper dive to understand. Family constitutions and family governance protocols can be dysfunctional. I could argue they could even introduce chaos. So speaking of velocity of destruction, which Ray didn't really mention in his, could come from several different ways. Again, the greatest threat to the family of wealth is the family. To do deeper, how do you incorporate areas in family governance into adaptability? Questions arise as to linear problems. Are linear methods sufficient to solve non-linear problems? Linear thinking of the assumption that the analysis of the past will help to predict the future is futile. Why? Since new and unknown patterns may emerge that we haven't seen in the past. So that leads me to ask a little bit of the question that I think I need to ask. Is being a historian of what happened in the past going to help you in a rapidly changing world moving forward? I mean, what? General Eisenhower, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, but the act of planning, I'm going to say the act of strategy. He was a little off with the word plan. The act of strategy is still very important. The great philosopher Mike Tyson, We all have a plan until we get hit. So, but again, the act of preparation and planning and strategy, I agree, is still very, very valuable. But I do question looking at it from the historical perspective. Are you going to learn to adapt to a rapidly changing world where the paradigm that you know was either wrong or simply has changed? I think how the world works is very different than what you might have learned in school. And I mean, don't get me started on school and education. What a racket and what a model outside of certain professions where you need specific licensing. But really, are deep and creative thinkers really coming from that, or people that actually do and execute? And again, this comes from knowing there's so many entrepreneurs, many of them that created great wealth, and they are definitely different. They think for themselves. How about that word? We'll keep it really simple. Think for yourself. At the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to. Billionaire Michael Saylor, when I interviewed him at MIT, like, yeah, what I really learned is how to think for myself. So that is really kind of what a lot of it comes down to. Bureaucratic, feudal estate, is it beyond bankrupt? And at some point, will they go after the assets of their people? They're super rich. These are things, speaking out history can repeat itself, that have happened, including some of the issues that I described with some of the revolutions. And again, so you do have to be somewhat of a historian to understand what has happened and what could happen. But how they'll play out moving forward means you're going to have to be more of an adaptive thinker. And to me, that comes down to competency, defined as the capacity and capability, especially within the family and the rising generations. All things that my creating and adapting into a top 1% family office talks about, and my sovereign risk and disaster prep and that masterclass as well is going to be deep in. So what are some on Monday at 4 p.m. when I have on the former Green Beret, Ian Burlingame, and his book was great. I love his work and proud to call him a friend and a member of the Dream Team. And again, like I said earlier, we do not agree on everything, not at all. And that's good. Like, I'd be concerned. Damn, why would this dude or gal or anyone agree with me on everything? What the hell is wrong with that? We're going to talk a little bit about trust structures. And actually, in my disaster prep masterclass, I got some of the world's greatest deeper thinker and thought leaders globally. So if you're a U.S. citizen, of course, you got to be careful how you structure your corporations, your LLCs. You have a private trust company. What trust assets do you have? Where is it domiciled? How is it structured? But you got to have an onshore and an offshore strategy. And you got to understand a lot of the nuances of that. This is kind of complicated. I mean, I know you want to apply Occam's razor and just try to keep it simple. And yes, sometimes the simplest solution could be best, even within a complex paradigm. But sometimes you just have to face reality. You don't have all the knowledge internally, and having an opportunity to have a dream team, however it may be, and having resources that are funneling in so you can process information, critical think, and make a decision is very important. But we are going to talk a little bit about that, a little bit about reputational warfare, what I would call information warfare, freedom of movement. Now, you could be super rich, but suppose there's lockdowns. You might even have other passports. Suppose they're frozen. Suppose travel is frozen. Suppose you're deemed to be an enemy of the state and the government. They freeze or limit your assets. I mean, didn't that kind of happen in a North America country called Canada? Or at least a threat of it with the truck drivers? Like you're just foolish if you think that things can't go wrong. This is a velocity of destruction. And as an advisor, if that's what you are, man, this could really set you apart because like no one else is talking about it. How fluid are you on it? How adaptive is your thinking? What value are you bringing to the table? And what's the depth of your team and your quote unquote, your dream team and your resources? And again, like I said, the wealth creators appear to be down with listening. It's the others, including often the SFO executives, because it's a little scary. It's like, I have a paradigm. It's 9 to 5. I got day-to-day things. that are, fixing the roof or getting a contractor for the house in Aspen. And now you're wanting me to think these big picture things that, yes, they could be devastating. But again, unknown unknowns. You don't know what you don't know. And this creates, it creates a bit of a problem. So it's a big, big issue. We kind of already spoke about the unipolar to a multipolar world. The US, the UK, the EU in general, the inability to prevent global realignment, NATO and related intelligence and military capabilities no longer able to dominate, I would say, their counterparts around the world. Why is the system even sustainable? Probably since the early 90s. That's Bretton Woods in the 40s, off the gold standard in 71. How is this even sustainable the way it's been done, with the dollar being backed by nothing but the good faith and promise of the US government? And a lot of that, you just have to be realistic. It applies to military and intelligence capabilities, forcing countries to remain, I would say, in a bankrupt system to keep buying our debt. This is just a reality of how the world works. And being an American and a US citizen, I guess that plays to my advantage comparative to being in another country. And I always said, and again, I'm a big believer in having multiple passports, being a global citizen, having multiple resources. But don't forget, there's way more people looking to come here to the US than are looking to get out. Way more. It's not even close. And I've done multiple discussions over the years with deep thinkers and thought leaders on diversifying into multiple passports and what countries. And some of them, you begin to learn, I guess you could say, are conflicted. How did they get paid? And there's a variety of factors that come into play. Is that really going to be a great move? Like, really? Whew. Like, I do talk about in sovereign risk and disaster preparedness, even while doing all that, like, what are going to be the safest options? I know I had so many of you, international, like, oh, Angelo, the future is the UAE and it's Singapore. I'm not denying that there's not intriguing aspects to both of those. In the UAE, you have Dubai, beautiful, I guess safe. We could come back to that. Modern, great talent, taxation. Well, if you're a US citizen, that's going to follow you everywhere. But for every other citizen, it's great. But I always was a little skeptical. Get a penthouse, open up an account. Sure. Some business interest. Sure. Satellite family office. Maybe. But I don't know, like, things could go wrong in Singapore. I think I told you one of the agencies invited me to speak about effectively risk in family offices. And I was basically told, like, don't say anything negative about one really, really big country in Asia. Like, really? Like, you're looking to conflict me? Now, don't get me wrong. You don't think that happens here in the US as well? Like at a university? So many of you are, these university family office programs. They usually suck. They're incredibly bureaucratic. They're professors infighting, professors who often are academia and not practical in their execution, incredibly tilted towards one side of the aisle politically, I might add, wink, wink. And they'll bombard you with making donations and charitable contributions forever to the universities. I was involved in a couple of them. I'm open-minded to what the future could look like with that, and maybe some of my programs making it into there. I do speak at universities. Shockingly, some of them in finance invite me to talk about family offices and a little bit about, the youth and what I would do if I was 18 or 22 and looking to get into financial services or the family office world. So I still like to do that. And I think there are good people, don't get me wrong, inside universities, but there's a lot that are just playing it safe. It's 9 to 5. They're a part of one side and not the other. And to think that you're going to get deep, unconflicted information on family offices, it's laughable. You may get halfway decent academia on family governance issues. You'll probably definitely get in on family business. I think Christina Wing at Harvard does a very good job relative on the family business side for sure. You'll get some investment talk, but are you going to get really deep on the issues that I'm talking about here? Geopolitical, economics, a deeper dive into investing, not just simply what the professors want to teach, taxation, and the whole issue around the dynamics of family and family governance and how that interplays into the topics that we're talking about today. I have a fair number of things here, but you know what? We've been going on pretty long. I see there's some comments, and thank you, in the comments section, but no real specific questions. So we'll probably begin to take it a little bit to the home stretch, but I will state, because how I kind of started and how some of you have asked me in the last week or two. So yes, I'm the owner of what I created at Family Office Masterclass, and I'm very proud of it. It's a hyper deep and immersive educational platform. I have 3 methods of distribution: in person, which I think is still the best, but not always the most efficient. I have the opportunity in 2 more months for a complete digital download of each of the programs, but then you're going to get a lot of stuff without the ability to ask questions or interact per se. But some of you may still want that. And again, the once a week over the course of a quarter, taught on a specific evening, and then recorded so if you can't make it, but you can still digitally interact at the moment. It's the interaction part that I think is very, very important. So yeah, creating or readapting, reimagining into a top 1% family office, sovereign risk and disaster preparedness for the super rich and family offices and AI. There technically is a 4th. It basically is, let's identify your problem and let me build a personalized masterclass with me and my dream team around that. So I have what I deem to be the best deep immersive educational platforms teaching through true masterclasses, which are, in my opinion, a minimal of 20 to 24 hours of instruction, if not some ancillary value, videos, and connectivity to me that would add significantly to that. It's not just me. It's a dream team of guest lecturers, people I interview, case studies, interaction with your questions. And again, what did I say about learning? Read a book, how to kick a soccer ball and how to play soccer or how to play baseball or get immersed in it. The latter is kind of important. And that is probably where being hands-on in engaging with me and or my dream team collectively or independently, I think would be very, very important. There was a comment that here it is. A masterclass is far more than what the lecturer, me or my dream team teaches. It is everything you can imagine to read, to hear, and to feel into it as well. So that's always interesting as well, getting feedback in my beta program this summer. Like, what did you think of this, this, and that? Oh, like, I didn't even think of that. I don't know if I meant it from that perspective, but how your mind, how your creativity, like, wow, like that was good. I'm going to now adapt what I'm doing to kind of be inclusive of that. So self-education is like so important. And to have it accelerated from people who know what they're doing, time and energy is valued by money. So a Tony Robbins quote, I interviewed Tony in person once and at his studios in Palm Beach. A Tony Robbins quote that changed my life: you will fail for the simple reason you don't have the right skills to succeed. That insight led me to invest over 6 figures over the years in learning and knowledge. I've paid to be a part of programs at the Milken Conference, even at the Clinton Global Initiative back in the day, at SALT. I've paid for mentoring. I've paid for consulting, when combined into the 6 figures, well into it. And those were valuable to accelerating my capability, my capacity, my capability for my competency and my skill set in terms of what I needed and what I wanted to do. So that was very, very important to me. Listen, this is an opaque industry, the family office world. It's $10 trillion and growing. What an amazing industry to be in. Yet compared to when I started, which technically really was about 20 years ago, I'm an OG. I'm old. I know it. Like, I don't know if it's that much better in terms of the community coming together and great resources. I did a live yesterday where I spoke about kind of the OGs of the community, like legends like Sarah Hamilton at Fox Family Office Exchange. Kudos, much respect to her. Charlotte Beyer at IPI, even the folks, the grouchy folks, but they mean well and they do a good job at Triple C. Like sometimes the OGs, the old guard, imagine back then, especially when Fox started, no internet, no social media. Like, wow, like you really had to be grassroots and boots on the ground. So titans that we now know, like Jay Hughes and so many others, and even me when I launched, like we helped to give them a platform so they could expand their thoughts. And none of the groups I mentioned or me when I started Family Office Association, we start certainly humble, being quiet, working hard, and putting in the grind. And then after time, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you become competent. If you care, if you're a lifelong learner, and you put in the work, and brother, every day, 7 days a week, hours and hours. If you love the family office community, and this is my passion, and I want to be great at it, and I still have a way to go, man. I got a way to go, but I'm really excited. I've been in it a long time, traveling the world, meeting with amazing families, and learning so much from many of the great people that I talk to, that I interview, and that I get to interact with. And I could just think of the billionaires, the entrepreneurs, the figureheads, all that. And yeah, sometimes you do begin to realize they're human, right? There's like nothing necessarily special. What is their mindset and what's their traits? Like all these things come into fruition to what led me to create the Masterclass series, to look at the global landscape and kind of be disappointed in terms of what I see. There's more of them in terms of so-called competitors and thinkers, but it seems more disjointed than when I started 20 years ago, and then even looking back before that into what I described as the late 80s and 90s. Yet the industry of great families of wealth, I mean, wow, 10 trillion and growing. So if you could accelerate your knowledge, I don't care if you're a wealth creator, an entrepreneur, an inheritor, working in a family office, want to work in a family office, or an advisor, like really, that's not worth it to you? How else are you going to learn in this community? It took me 20 years, and I'd like to hope I'm a little smart and dedicated, and every day, hours and hours, and the interactions that I had. I mean, I might be able to accelerate that for you through my master classes alone in like hours. Like I said, whatever, 22, 24, 26 hours, and then some level of engagement from there. I was going to do a project for someone. It didn't quite work out. We couldn't kind of make it work. But like basically in 30 days, like really like not going from 0 to 50, not 0 to 100, but like 0 to 240 miles an hour race car level. Like how important is it to you? So again, these are all things. There's resources out there. You know how to reach me. I'm active on social media. Subscribe to my LinkedIn. Definitely my 2 YouTubes, Family Office TV and Family Office. I would do Twitter as well. And obviously, everything from what I'm describing in the masterclasses, for now, I'll bifurcate them to familyofficemasterclass.com or this or that sometime in the future. But for now, it's all under my brand, simply Angelo Robles. And my email is angelo@angelorobles.com. I think by now you all know how to reach me. I hope you all have an amazing weekend. And don't forget, I got a busy, busy schedule this upcoming week. And wow, again, Monday at 4, Tuesday at 1. Actually, Jamie McLaughlin on converting your SFO to an MFO. So he is Tuesday, but I was thinking about about Ram, who couldn't make it today, at 1 o'clock on Thursday. And then Friday, I got that legend, Neek himself, on family governance. So, I got a busy week. And the week after that, Rebecca Patterson and others. So lots going on. Again, I'm more than happy to give free content and resources to the community, to give back all that it's gave to me. I want to be a friend. I want to be a resource. But I do also run a business. So go to angelorobles.com and learn more about our programs, our exclusivity and membership, and really our masterclass programs. Thank you all so much and have a great weekend.